Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's regular scheduled board meeting on 12/16/2021 of the Horsehead Central School District Board of Education. Tonight, we are also in person as well as via our internet connection and video. We remind people that we are under a mask mandate. And then also, ladies and gentlemen, we wish to ask you to please be careful out there as the infection rate in the area for COVID-19 has been on the rise in the district. We are starting to see a slight decline from the Thanksgiving holiday recess, but we know we need to really get past the beginning of the new year. So we want to thank all of our students, staff, community members for helping us achieve as safe as possible our educational platform throughout this pandemic. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our Board President, Ms. Christine Dale.
Okay, can everybody please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just want to comment how festive it looks in here, so thank you for that. I know it wasn't for us, but it looks really nice.
What?
Okay, so first up on the agenda, we have the approval of our minutes from November 18th, as well as November 30th, our public hearing on the capital project. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Any comments or discussion on either of these items? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, next we have our time for our community questions and comments. A couple of ground rules about this. If anybody in the community would like to pose a comment or a question, I'd ask you to come up to the podium, state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes. We do hold to that 3 minutes strict, so I will stop you when you get to that point. I just want to remind you that any comments or questions, please do not refer to specific people, personnel, issues like that. If there's anything related to that, you would go to the superintendent directly. So if anybody would like to make a comment or ask a question, I'd invite you to come up now. Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to our report from Caitlin.
All right, good evening, everyone. Winter sports are in full swing. Boys swimming picked up a win here at our home pool. Boys basketball started their season with a home win. Boys bowling won against Maine Endwell. Boys wrestling won title at the Elmira Tourney, and testing for all after-school activities have begun. The Green Room players have started rehearsals for both the annual variety show and the spring musical Once on This Island. The variety show will take place January 7th here in the auditorium at 6 p.m. Once on This Island will show on March 17th through the 19th. Look out for tickets to go on sale soon. The Wind Ensemble Orchestra and newly created jazz band had a successful concert this Tuesday. Look forward to next week for the high school's choir's concert on Wednesday, as well as the intermediate school's concerts through the week. Concert band will have a concert next month on January 11th. Next week is Winter Spirit Week, and Student Council is very excited to see some holiday spirit among staff and students. All of the classes are currently having a friendly competition to see which class can donate the most toys for Tots in celebration of Christmas. Feel free to donate. Senior shoutouts have begun on the school's social media accounts, so keep an eye out for your friends and family. The National Honor Society is collecting coats and gloves for Hearts for the Homeless and monetary donations for the victims of the recent tornadoes in Kentucky and surrounding states. Any of these donations can be dropped off in room 158 or at the tables outside the cafeteria. I'd like to share my congratulations to the board on the passing of the second part of the capital project. Students are looking forward to seeing how the school changes and updates even more. On top of that, students are already excited for the warmer weather to start using the new inner courtyard and spend some time outside. Thank you for your time.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. Now we have our presentations. So we have a presentation on the Learning Management System update. So Mr. Gill?
While he's getting ready, Caitlin, did anybody use it today? No. It was a great day, too. Mr. Coughlin?
I don't know if we're allowed out there yet or not.
I know I saw him. He's moving around. We had a little septic problem today here, so I will check on that, but I do not know the answer, and I don't want to get myself in trouble. Mr. Gill.
It's going to take a moment to load up the presentation. I'm not sure if you would like to move on to the other items and come back during your superintendent's report?
If the board is okay, it will shorten my report a little.
That's fine with me.
Just so that you know, with some of the interesting things with COVID-19, obviously our athletics extracurriculars have some ongoing issues that we have to either address or update. But one that is very concerning that superintendents in the Southern Tier are really worried about is we have been informed by New York State Public High School Athletic Association that they are unwilling to change state championship sites. Some of the sections have already started to change those sites because the sites have a mandatory vaccination clause, which all student, spectators, and athletes must be able to show proof of mandatory full vaccination in order to be on their property. One such is RIT. This affects indoor track, and it will affect state championship cheerleading. Our superintendents are writing a letter to hopefully help Mr. Zayas understand that although he may not wish to address it, the individual schools that pay his bills do want it addressed, and that's widely seen across the state. But if he chooses not to, we need to prepare our community, because if one student is unvaccinated, we will not participate. We cannot single out an individual, and we are not going to ask students to get vaccinated to do that, but I want the board to know. In addition, masking in athletics still remains to be an issue. We have some issues because of our location being next to Pennsylvania, and I'd like to make a reasonable recommendation to our safety plan that when we are in New York State, we will follow New York State's masking rules, and anybody that comes to our gymnasiums will follow them, even if they are not used to doing it in their own gymnasiums. When we go to another New York State, we expect them to follow New York State, but one way or another, our students and athletes will, and that is more about the mask above the nose and below the chin and not a chin strap. However, we will take care of our own issues if that's the case. But when we play across the state lines, Pennsylvania does not have a masking. Because we are a New York State school, we are obligated for our students to follow it, but I don't want to eliminate competition for those students if they have to go across the state line because of our proximity. I think it's reasonable if our students know that they have to be masked and play unmasked students, that it's minimal contact with them, but we do what we're supposed to do according to the State Department of Health for New York State students. And I would hope that the board would see that as reasonable in a middle ground, because sooner or later we are going to have to come out of this. Does anyone on the board see any major problem as long as we follow our rules with whoever we're competing against? And the reason I ask that is because we know a lot of our students, once they plan travel or they go outside of school, are playing in a variety of unmasked events or have that option. Any comments from the board? If there's no hesitancy, what I will do is I'll put that into play for starting next week. And if we've lost any contests from out of state because we put a hold on it, we will attempt to reschedule them. I know Mr. Detay is over there. I couldn't see him, but Mr. Detay, if you can do that for boys basketball, and then also look at all of our others. We do have to keep and be mindful of any significant rise or infection rate wherever we're going. And the only thing is, if a county is under a state of emergency, we will not travel into that county if the state of emergency is declared for COVID-19. Does that also make sense? Right now, there are only two, Erie County and Monroe County.
Erie and who?
Monroe County. Rochester and Buffalo are under a COVID state of emergency. But that can be lifted at any time, and once it's lifted, we would resume play in those areas. Mr. Gill, Mr. Adams?
I would ask Dr. Douglas that there would be heightened mitigation or testing that would be put in for a team that did travel outside and was not able to
And that's a
abide by
good point
that.
that I forgot, so thank you. What happened is when we did find out, we actually went through a 3-day testing mitigation with that specific team, just to try to make sure that the team didn't lose any future because of a potential outbreak. With another, because we did 3 days with that team because we're kind of using the test to stay protocol, even though we can't use it for athletic, we're using that model. What it was is our one team, when we found out about it, was already 4 days into the cycle, so we wanted to get to 7. One other team was in day 1, so we tested them straight through the week. And I'm happy to report that we had absolutely no positives out of that. We can't always say that, but that, I think, is that layered mitigation that we're trying to just be as successful and safe as possible.
Thank you.
Dr. Douglas, can I just make a comment?
Yes.
So I just want to, I know there's not a lot of people here in the audience, but I'm hopeful that there's maybe people at home listening. I just want to make a comment, really asking of the parents and the spectators to really be diligent in wearing masks, whether you're in a home environment, at one of our home games, and also if you're going to visit at another New York State school, that you are respectful of the New York State rules with masking. But at the end of the day, it's all about the students, and it's all about being able to and allow them to continue to play and participate. And so we all need to do our part in maintaining that safety environment. So it's just, we've been seeing pictures and videos and things like that where that diligency, if that's even a word, is completely being followed. So I just ask for everybody to do your part so our students can continue to safely participate.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for that, and also just to add one other piece. Because we are not restricting spectators at this point to the seating capacity that we have shoulder to shoulder, as long as they are fully masked, we also have to warn, if the numbers continue to increase or we have a significant outbreak, the district will minimize those coming in because we do broadcast. We owe that to the students to try to keep as much of any potential impact to the team and their competitions as minimal as possible. We don't wish to, so we're still moving forward. We're seeing some changes in the data, like I said, from the Thanksgiving break, but we still have a major break to go through. I can't tell anybody or ask anybody to do anything different. Just please be safe and be mindful of that, especially our athletes and our extracurricular activities, as one disappointing day of news could ruin an event for a couple weeks for several people, so we're all in it together. So that's what I have. Thank you for that. I will come back after the presentation and it'll carry on some others. Are you all set, Mr. Gill?
Thanks to Chris and Bill. Yes, we're all set. Let people move. All right, so just a quick update on a process that we've embarked on these last several months to let the Board of Education and the community know where we're heading with what's called our Learning Management System, or LMS is an acronym because we need acronyms more in education. So our LMS system is our platform, and we'll get to a definition in a moment. We have been using It's Learning. We talked last June of the fact that that contract expires and the It's Learning has removed themselves from North America as an area of their business, and therefore we're left in a position to find another learning management system and to work towards an implementation at the end of this, during the school year in preparation for next school year. So to go about a process, we make sure we get the stakeholder groups at the table. We had 2 teams that were created, a core team and a larger team. We didn't have time for creative names, so forgive me. This core team was supposed to be those that are very highly tech intensive and understand technology and really know ins and outs without much learning and can tinker very quickly. So it was a voluntary, they volunteered their time, they met after school several times, and I'll show that in a moment, to talk about what we call non-negotiables, the things that we're looking for to hold tight when it came to selection of an LMS, and to find necessary language associated with the LMS and develop a timeline for this work. I'll go into more detail on each of these teams in a moment. After which, then we brought on a larger group of volunteers to meet after school to really choose a couple LMSs and get into the dirt and mess with them and do a variety of tasks to determine what was going to be selected. That gives you an idea who was on that core team to start with. A mixture of teachers and administrators, members of our land techs and our instructional techs. And then our larger team was that same group plus some additional teachers. Again, they all volunteered their time, and anybody that asked for participation to be part of it, we welcomed. No one was turned away from either of these teams in the end. So here is kind of the outline of those meetings that Tiffany and Bill led to review. What is the charge? What's the purpose? What is our task here? To do some common learning so that you can move forward with some common understandings. And what is a non-negotiable list? And I'll show you what they came up with momentarily. Meeting 2, again, reflect on that list and review some LMS and what's out there and determine what those top 3 LMS contenders would be given the non-negotiables, and then proceed to give that information on, and then the larger team met. What's great about this larger team is they chose to meet a 4th time. They weren't scheduled to, but they selected to come back a 4th time because they really felt they needed further conversation. During their 2nd and 3rd meeting, they did talk with the vendors, the salespeople of these particular programs. Not only did they take those non-negotiable, what we hold tight, but they also, okay, well, what would be nice to haves? And what are some other priorities we might would like to see in a system? Keep in mind that in between each of these meetings, 7 in all, there are a feedback loop. There was an expectation that they would go back to their stakeholder group, have conversations, talk with students even in some cases, and show the students particular LMS systems to toy with, get some feedback even from them, and just collect concerns, questions from the field. This is the definition that they worked with. Much like a vision statement or anything else, much time and effort was put into this to articulate what they were trying to accomplish and what we saw as a tool to learn for learning in the future as a system post-COVID. So it's a cloud-based centralized hub used to document, track, report, and deliver educational programming. This LMS will promote collaboration and communication among students, staff, and families throughout our greater nation. So here's a non-negotiable list that they worked on over the course of 2 meetings. We must make sure it's compliant with New York State. That's right there, must have that. If it doesn't, it can't even be looked at and onboarded as a system. We might have to make sure it talks with our base system, Microsoft. If it doesn't, we can't move forward. Because we have teachers that use Google Classroom and other aspects of Google, we wanted to make sure that there's some connectivity. There's other parts of Google Classroom that are more important than that sort of, it's not really an LMS, but that platform, that we wanted to make sure some of their work would be integrated into this system. We have to make sure it works with all our student information systems, school tool talk. We have to keep one of those 2 systems stable as we integrate the other. You can't go out and get a new student management system or a student information systems and an LMS all at once. You have to make sure that you have one that's stable, integrate it, and then if you want to switch a student management system or move SIS or information, you have to have a stable environment on one side or the other. Every night we have systems that sync. We have to continue to make sure that that's updated and our student management system and other tools connect automatically without anybody having to press any buttons. Single sign-on, we always talked about when it came to INS learning, single point access. Works with multiple devices. It can work with a phone, iPad, laptop, Apple. Is integrated as much devices as possible. We wanted to make sure that there was support with local support. We wanted to make sure that locally we can reach out and have support from those well, whether it be GST BOCES or another BOCES, or the vendor was located nearby or had representatives that could be here to be on site to assist. Accessible tech support. We don't want to be on the line and waiting. We want to make sure we had instantaneous. It's Learning did provide that. We wanted to make sure that we had that here. Communicates directly with students. It allows the ability to communicate directly with students. Provides adaptive technology, especially when differentiate and looking for modifications or students with disabilities. And has an assessment and feedback loop available, a tool within it. Useful and meaningful analytics. Any system can shoot out information, but we're data rich, information poor. We want to make sure that the data is what we need. It's what we want. It's not just, hey, look at all these pretty charts, but we don't know what to do with it. So it had to be very useful and meaningful. I think, is that the last one, Tiff? Now, Tiffany and Bill were very much, and I believe Kelly as well, very much involved in these conversations. I just want to pause for a moment, and if there's any clarity or any questions you have about those non-negotiables, provide that for the board, and Tiff and Bill can respond. Okay. Oh, sorry. Forgot the age-appropriate interface. We wanted to make sure that does it have the ability to switch its view for someone that's a senior as opposed to someone that's a kindergartner. So does it have larger icons? It goes to a tile-based, or does it have a, can it change based, and can we adapt to the student need? Okay, that was the last one. Here are the three this is the last task of the core team that were, met those non-negotiables. These are the three that are being reviewed and discussed now, and the next action steps that come forward. That larger team had sandbox ability and were able to mess with some of these systems and talk with the individual vendors themselves and get a feeling to what they liked and what they heard from them. The first task of the larger team was to take those foundational high priorities, but then start to talk about what else might we need and what are some nice to haves as we look at these three systems specifically. So they reviewed, they had presentations from those three remaining LMSs, and a review criteria was utilized. Tiffany and Bill did a nice job to put together a very succinct system in which a rubric was created. If it lets me move through it. So that's frozen. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I could try that. Thank you. No. So I could post this later to the board doc so it can be seen. It's a list that goes through a page for each of the LMSs and a criteria for student lens and teacher lens and a 4-based rubric system, I believe it was, to rate that particular LMS on that criteria that they were looking for. So you can see step 1 was the review of the LMS and the student lens. And like I said, unfortunately, it is locked up, and I cannot show that to you. I could try one more thing. No, the whole system's locked. And I'm not going to go through it for us quick right now, so we'll go back to this. I will be sure to share that so it's put on board docs. So next steps, we're going to share the details of the team's work with building and district admin. We're beginning to price the different vendors, talk about what their offer, their abilities. We'll need to select an LMS shortly, develop a timeline, get our professional learning plan, and understand how the data is going to migrate, and a test site to start working on any kinks now for that fall implementation. It does say initial implementation. We know that you're not going to throw a whole large package all at once to teachers. There's got to be an understanding this is the expectation to start, then give more professional learning. Okay, now let's move it up to this level. Let's move it up to this level. We're going to have explorers that are going to go forward and do a lot off the bat, but we also know that others are going to need more support. So we'll benchmark the implementation because these are robust programs. These aren't small, learning management systems are by nature robust. So we'll have an initial implementation. We want to make sure we work out all our kinks for that fall 2022. That's all I have.
Questions?
Join me up here, Ted.
So, actually, we'll just go over. So my question is really easy. So one, I think the process that you went through is great, and the people that you included, that's awesome. I think this is going to be, when It's Learning was put into place, that was a huge learning curve for staff, for students, and for parents, right? So are you going to build in some sort of awareness sessions, training sessions, specifically for parents? I mean, obviously, I know you're going to do the professional development with staff, and the students are going to have that hands-on use, but, for those parents that are trying to help their students navigate through that kind of stuff, to be able to do sessions with them as well.
We are definitely, actually, there's three different plans. There's going to be a plan of what we need to do for staff to save their information from It's Learning and move that over, and what that looks like. So that there's going to be a rollout for that. The other piece then will be the professional learning for our staff in many different avenues and options for them, so that they can learn, because not everybody can learn the same way. So we want to offer that in the spring as well as through the summer, and then all through next year as well. And then we're looking at evening sessions for parents, so we can do some different options there. One that the LMS company can actually come in and do some of that, but then we'll have some videos that we can get from the vendor as well.
Okay, great. Great. Good. Warren?
So, with the final selection process, if the team feels strongly about, let's say, Company A, and they present that to the administration and the building principals, could they say, we feel we want Company B, and turn down all of the team's work?
This is why we had those rubrics done, so we can look back at hard and fat. We had 7 or 8 administrators on that larger team. So it's not like either team, they had a feedback loop as well. So it's not like the members of the administrative team are ignorant to what those final 3 were, and their input was already provided during the process. So there's no one being blindsided during this process. Both those teachers involved and our administrators for the last 7 meetings have been feedback looped to those other groups. So when they come forward, the only some people that haven't been in the room, to be honest with you, would be the executive team. We've been the ones a little bit more on the outside of this conversation. So to look at those rubrics and to get the feedback from our admin and our teachers, and then look at the financial piece and what to ask hard questions of members of those team to feel good about what a selection might be. I can't answer that until we go through that process, but I know that there is one that's rising to the top. But it's because we're informed. We do have conversations. There is a feedback loop.
One of the things, Warren, I've been through this twice now, once as a principal, once as a superintendent. I think what happens is I've put a lot of faith and trust into the team. My job is to vet any decision that they have with my team, with their pros and cons and stuff, and I may go back to them and say, okay, answer this, or I wonder this, or this money. But a lot of it is the collaborative. The decision ultimately is at the district level. We all know that because we have to end up recommending something to purchase through either BOCES or through the board. But implementation, you have to strongly keep in mind that we're not the ones implementing it. And the ones that are implementing it, we have to make sure that we've done our due diligence and give them a platform that is helpful for them, the students, the community, keeping in mind what they need too. And I think that's how we've operated, and I would say, if anything, it's thoughtful discussions to arrive, hopefully, at more of a consensus to bring to me.
Thank you.
borrowing my neighbor's mic. Mine's not working. So, thank you for the presentation, and obviously a lot of thought was put into the substantive criteria, which I think is well done. But just two questions. One, I know it's not, anything kind of our doing that It's Learning is changing and no longer going to service this area, but so as part of the question process to these candidates, did we get any kind of, as far as we can tell, their roadmap doesn't involve them potentially leaving the market for one reason or another, right?
Good question. That was definitely something that was looked at as far as especially having a presence in New York State and well invested. Matter of fact, one of the vendors that was on the finalist list is actively seeking out those that used to use It's Learning, right? But it's the business model, right? And take that on and promise the integration of the work from one to the other seamlessly. So that was also a consideration of the committee because there's a lot of work that was put into It's Learning over the years to save and have materials, and to be able to capture that and bring it over would be powerful for everybody in time saving. But yeah, that was definitely a conversation that was ongoing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
From that.
And I think another piece is the supports. We looked at supports in many different layers. We looked at what do our staff need supports, what do the people behind the scenes need supports, how readily is that available? So that comes also with not even, are they going to be around, but what can we have as supports and help as we go through this process?
Okay, great. And then my other question, and certainly I think meeting all of the non-negotiables and then the nice-to-haves is the most important, but did some part of the review involve looking at the financial aspect of it as well, so that if there was, if two were close on the initial criteria, but materially different on the financial side, we'd have that full picture before we make a selection?
Absolutely, and actually that's what I talked to Tiffany and Bill about last Friday, and they've already set up those meetings to get those numbers. Plus, we want to see what is the professional learning offered by the company on an ongoing basis, at what cost, what could be co-servable, what we're going to get through BOCES and aidability as a consideration, as well as what's the upfront cost and what's the bang for your buck. I mean, of those three systems, there is a tier, there's a favorite in there. And if a price point, is that enough to say, there's got to be a financial decision in the end, right? A little bit. And I think right now we're good. These are all three companies that are well established in public schools. They're not exorbitant in their price, they're not gouging. I think we're good. It's just, what are we going to get for the cost? And what's the promise of support moving forward? Is it the 24/7? Is it a localized GST BOCES person that supports it, which is great if possible? Those are considerations that we should look at long term. We'll have initial upfront costs that I know will be high. That's a given, because we're going to pay for setup, installation, all the background, all the work that goes into integration, and then the training also comes with a price, and then year two it starts to wane, and then you get into routine cost, and so we got to look at what the routine cost is at the end as well. Year three, year four, what's the cost of the district compared to those three? And not be shy away from year one, because if we get what we need with that integration from It's Learning to the new one, then it's worth that cost.
Yeah.
Tony, are all three BOCES co-servable?
Either through cross-contract or local, I believe.
But all three are,
The D2L or Bright Space at this point, the other BOCES in New York, so we would have to reach out probably.
whether it's cross-contract or anything, the big thing is every one of these are eligible for our BOCES aid ratio. So we would have an initial upfront cost, but that would come back to us in aid the following year and every year after that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it definitely answers my question. I mean, and certainly it's not the kind of thing where you want to just pick the lowest bidder, but just the opposite, right? We want to make sure the substance is there, but I just wanted to get a sense as to how the financial piece was being thought of too, so thanks.
And it's a great point, Dan, that's really that comes up to our level now. I wouldn't ask that of that team. I want them focus on instruction.
Yeah.
Right now, those are the financial questions that Tom and I get into and ask and have wonders about, and what are we going to get for it.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks.
I assume there's districts in the state that use all three packages. Are you able to call up some of those and get their evaluation and kind of recommendations and pros and cons?
Yeah, we actually did that for all, as well as had some of our students pilot a little bit and got some student feedback as well, especially at the middle school and high school. So that played into part of our review.
Great, thank you.
Going down memory lane, I remember when things first started, being in my basement, that I outfitted for my daughter's office, and we had It's Learning did those 1-hour trainings that my daughter and I watched, and it was a pretty frantic time back then, and I think one thing, not saying it's any less frantic now, but we've, in most things with COVID, I think, reflecting from a county perspective, we're a little better than we were in the past, and maybe not so much franticness back then. I think you did a great job as far as the evaluation groups, but from a parent input, you know, after we got through that, I brought it up on my phone, I have a folder for my daughter that still has School Tool, It's Learning, and Artsonia to manage the apps that I need just for my one daughter. Not from some of the feedback I got from parents, and I understand back in the day it was kind of a little more frantic, the needing multiple platforms for one child for their educational needs has, from a parent perspective, and I don't assume there were many or any in those evaluation groups, is that part of the rubric? Are we still going to be, will a parent still be going between School Tool to get grades and having to go back to It's Learning for the content and Artsonia for mugs and magnets?
No, as a parent myself, you know, I can tell you that, I mean, granted, my kids have an advantage of a tech director, as, you know, so that...
Is it an advantage, Bill?
Yeah, there's some support at home. But, you know, we did take a look at that. I think part of what your statement there was true in that, you know, I think the way we looked at It's Learning was a reaction of time. Now we're looking at this where we're going to have a lot more people on board who know the system. So that when you are reaching out to a teacher, you're not a teacher who's probably had some time with this to grow and maybe answer some of those questions. And that's, I think, the big difference right here. As far as the multiple systems, the reason why we were looking at the LMSs and some of the things you saw in the integration there, were we looking at Microsoft and Google. We do have some teachers with Google and some with Microsoft. What this does is kind of bridges both of them together so that my 5th grader is going to have almost the same exact experience as is my 3rd grader. And that's really, I think, I totally understand that as a parent. You aren't trying to log into different things. And we're looking a lot of how it integrated with our student information system. That was a lot of the questions that we asked up front, like who can actually, you know, so that we can look at the grades and things of that nature. Now, there's some work involved here. That's why we're really trying this timeline. We really want to get into that data migration, because we, on a daily, every night, we transpose 52,000 bits of data from one platform to another. And, you know, that's something we have to really take a look at, and we're focused on it.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that there are it's not a full integration system. It's robust from an instructional point, but there are going to be times where School Tool is going to be required to look at as a parent. You won't find a one-stop shop in this aspect. I think LMSs are growing that way, but it requires an integration with the student management. As long as we're still using a School Tool system, perhaps when we solidify this particular LMS, now we look to, is there a better sync that can happen with our student information system? Is there a different tool out there that works better? But by onboarding this early and for all the great work that these teams have done, we have the time, which we didn't have before, to get through these kinks and figure out how's this work and what can we make happen very, you know, not have to do it. We purchased It's Learning, I think, in May, June. Sorry, we started to integrate, yes, in August, and it went live in September, right? So I think if we are pushing the schedule, I would like to be offering a purchase in January so that we can begin all this work throughout the spring. I mean, it's with a lot of thought going into it. We spent a semester research. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else from your superintendent report? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Dale. Coming back to several things that are going on. One, for parents out there, we've been doing a lot of test to stay and test to stay issues, whether it's with sports or the extra days. We have sent out, and please direct people to our website, but test to stay is from day 1 to day 7, or when you enter into one of those days. In other words, if you found out on day 4, you've got to test 5, 6, and 7. But please understand, as a community, day 8, day 9, and day 10, the child is still under isolation or quarantine and cannot participate in any extracurricular or athletic events here and should be isolated at home. However, on those 3 days, they can ride the bus in the morning and the afternoon. When it comes to direct contact tracing, one of the things that has been the most challenging at the beginning of the year was both lunches and transportation. I think our lunches have been handled by going back to the 6 feet as much as possible, and that has been helpful, and our kids have been doing wonderful at it. But our bus transportation, because we have to transport students to school, has had challenges. We've had challenges where parents are not sending their students with a mask to the bus, and they were put on the bus and given a mask, and then the student is wearing it and then taking it off. The district just sent out recent information is we are putting in a hard and fast rule. The children will be wearing a mask on the bus. A failure to respond and wear that mask appropriately will have a warning, a written warning, and then a removal from the bus from here on out for a period of time. If need be, it will be a full suspension of school. We don't wish that, so we wish for people to comply and help, because all it does is it technically puts other kids at the risk of losing their in-person education. Now, we advocated over this past week with our local county about changing the distancing direct contacting rules for on buses, similar to what's in the classroom, and lo and behold, we ask a question finally, within 3 days we get an answer, and I want to thank the county for pursuing that on our behalf, and now we are able to contact trace on a bus at 3 feet instead of 6 feet, which will minimize a large portion of direct contacts that we were not seeing have any type of issue, except that they were being excessively put out. And that puts stresses on test to stay, but it also puts stresses on parents. So we are moving to that right now. If you are already put out on a bus for direct contact, we are not adjusting going back. We are just moving forward, and we apologize for that's the only way we can handle it. We ask parents to remember that if you break the date of service in the test to stay can no longer be offered to you. In other words, if you show up on day 1, day 2, and then you're out on day 3, you are under isolation for the remainder of the time. Once we started, it must be in consecutive days up to day 7, then 8, 9, and 10. So please help us out. We are very happy. A lot of people are participating. Ms. Squires has been there every day. I've gone over a couple days. As we get through this surge, we are going to look at the potential of returning it to at least the elementary buildings and looking at what opportunity to break up the traffic line that's over at the field house, which hopefully will expedite it. But we're trying to be mindful of our staff and the labor that it takes to do test to stay. For the Board of Education, remember, we will be entering into a Board of Education retreat on January 12th, 4 o'clock. It will be at the high school cafeteria, and it will involve administrators. It will involve the Board of Education. It will be involve selected labor for helping us with diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions on our policy, as well as how we address many things that we have addressed over many years, but put more discussion behind it going forward in January. With the help of Corning Incorporated, some outside individuals are going to help us on behalf of Corning Incorporated, as well as in conjunction with the board and the district. So I remind you of that cafeteria, 4 o'clock. I would ask you to arrive about 15 minutes ahead, if possible, on January 12th. If the board can, I will be having Nancy send out a sort of a doodle calendar. I'm requesting that the full board not meet as a board, but as small groups of 3 to travel for a full day in February to meet our mandatory requirement of getting out and seeing our district, but also in 2 senses. We have a lot of construction and facility issues, so we'd like to take part of that day for that, as well as a part of the day to help the board understand, as I know you try to every day, what's going on in our classrooms and throughout our district. And then at the end of the day, we will divide the board up at the various levels, elementary, the middle level in elementary and high school, and have a district-wide staff chat during the month of February that will focus on the key issues of how was it as we started the pandemic, how is it different now, and how can we try to move forward the best we can within the parameters that we can, because I think that's important from all staff to be able to let the board hear some of that with the administration. So we will get that day. I will try to zero in on one of the weeks and try to hopefully get it so that all boards can be there. I think you'll be very impressed with the facilities as well as the dialogue with everybody at the end of the day. As I said earlier, the COVID data has been increasing just like last year, right after Thanksgiving for about a week and a half. Our concern is last year we had 2 weeks at the holiday winter break, which helped to mitigate upon our return. This year we do not. We really only have 5 school days in the winter break, and that is one of the reasons for the adjustment, because that gets me to 10 and a half days from the time that students will most likely be out, and they return on that Monday to hopefully minimize some of the COVID issues here in school and start fresh with our test to stay. And hopefully guidance will be changed in the future from the state. But right now we are where we're at, and everybody's been doing a real good job about it. We have received some questions and some complaints on both sides of the mask mandate. As you can see, it is a mandate in all areas, but unfortunately schools have one of the key pieces that if we do not comply with the Department of Health, our funding stream on the state side can be removed, and that's nothing that the community can withstand. So we are not like local businesses or other counties across the state that are saying we won't comply with the mandate. We are a government agency that must, otherwise we risk the opportunity to offer education as we know it to our students. So we ask people to please understand. Ladies and gentlemen, there's obviously TikTok, and social media is such a wonderful thing, but there is something that's going nationally on TikTok of threats to schools, but it's so generic. It comes up all the time. Law enforcement knows that they're now spoofing the telephone numbers like you get all the car insurance ads or your warranties out so that you can never trace them, but the language is so generic and nondescript that law enforcement are starting to deem these as just nuisance social media. Now, it's horrible if something ever happened, but I remind everybody we must be vigilant. If you really know of something, get to somebody, see something, say something. So please understand that we always look at safety as our #1 priority. We have worked with law enforcement in the regional areas, and they have basically been telling superintendents that these are nuisance reports at this point because of the nondescript nature and very shoddy wording. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, at our last meeting, we did have a resolution of the board. We have tried to offer, some clarity to the distractions that have come. Unfortunately, we are under a mask mandate. I want to thank the Horseheads Police Department as they've addressed it, and also tried to offer the individuals that had the concerns here some compassion that it is not our interest or our want to cause anybody any legal jeopardy. So we did not follow through at this point with any arrest, for disruption of a public meeting, endangering the welfare of children, and upholding governmental business. But what we did is we did put in an official warning, and the Horseheads Police Department has assured us that this will not be happening again. As a result, we have an officer who will be here checking everybody in and ensuring the compliance with the Department of Health until such time that they hopefully remove it in the near future. Again, we offer my office, if anybody wants to talk or have those conversations, I try to reach out to everybody and make sure that at least I can explain whether we agree or not, at least they've been heard. So I want to thank the board for addressing that and also giving me some levity, not to jam one of our community members up, but also to make sure that it's very serious. We will not be able to accept that as behavior on the school grounds. So that concludes my report. At this point, I do want to end by saying thank you to everybody coming out for our capital referendum. It is never easy when you look at that, but I hope that over the past years, with this referendum and the next referendum, we will move forward the same way. I always worry about capital increase in cost, but luckily we have Welliver and Hunt that we're looking into that in the out years and trying to factor as much as it in. But right now we are in a wild swing time right now, so our project that we have is protected, but we do have a small project that we are working on to save the district millions of dollars once we finalize Horseheads 2030 with a new facility and a new district office, senior center and community center in Center Street. And to do that, our past two summer projects will be combined with the help of federal funds to try to bring it to the best position in light of the ongoing economical changes that are going on daily with supply chains. So thank you, everybody, and I thank everybody for coming out. With a super majority on the capital project, both have passed that way, and it says something about the Horseheads community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Okay, next we have board reports. So again, I just want to echo what Dr. Douglas said about the capital improvement vote. So thank you to everybody who did come out. We are extremely excited about the improvements that have been made thus far and about the plans moving forward. So I do think it will help enable Horseheads to be the premier district in the area. So we did not have an audit committee this past month, but we did have a policy committee, so I'll turn it over to that committee.
Policy Committee met on December 2nd, and we discussed sexual harassment policies. The recommendation based on new federal law is to bifurcate the sexual harassment for staff policy from the sexual harassment for student policy. And so that's what you see in front of you today for first reading. We tabled the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy as well as our class rank policy discussion. We are recommending the deletion of policy 4317, teaching about drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, since it's not a mandatory policy, and the subject matter certainly has changed over time and is the policy is a little outdated at this point. And also we reviewed a policy on use of credit cards that with changes for first reading tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have our finance items for action. We have 8.02 through 8.16. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any comments, questions, or discussion on any of these items? Okay. All those in favor of 8.02 through 8.16, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right, item 9 are personnel items for action. We have our HR recommendations. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, or discussion? Mary Ann?
Okay, on item under instructional substitutes, candidate number 5, I will be voting no. And I have a question regarding candidates 6, 7, and 8 in category E. It says substitute teachers non-degreed, but with student teaching experience. And I'm wondering, are they first semester graduates? Will they be graduating in January? Or do they need another semester to be achieving their degree?
It is a mixture of both.
Okay. The ones who will not be receiving a degree first semester, I would be voting no. And if there's someone who is going to complete their degree requirements midterm and therefore be ready to substitute, then I would vote yes.
So Caitlin, are you able to tell us, just so we know which ones?
I'll get that right now.
Okay.
Ms. Corbett, the first one that you said, I'm just trying to find it.
Instructional
E5.
substitutes,
E5.
number 5, it says.
E5, okay.
E5.
I was looking below that and there wasn't a
That's a
5.
definite no because it's non-degreed.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on this? Warren?
I'll vote no on E5.
I'm especially concerned with the candidate who also, oops, it's shifting.
Sorry, I'm not very technical. The candidate in section F, who is going to be the contract substitute, and it says non-degreed student teaching experience, if that person is indeed not going to complete degree requirements after the first semester, then I would be voting no on candidate F2.
I believe the candidates 6 and 7 will be getting their degree in the spring.
6 and 7.
Yes, they do meet the board policy qualifications to be instructional substitutes in our district.
Okay, but not candidate 6.
She also meets the board policy
Okay.
to be an approved instructional substitute in the district.
Okay, so I will only be voting no then on candidate E5. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We have Mary Ann's and Warren's 2 nays. And any abstentions? Okay. Next, we have our miscellaneous items for action, 10.02 through 10.05. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, or discussion on any of these items? Warren?
I have a question on 10.04, the 95% consultant agreement. So, as I understand it, staff has been trained, or some staff members have been trained this month, and materials have been provided to them. Once they're fully trained, the materials that they're provided, is that enough for a classroom set, or it's just materials so that an individual can be trained and they're trained?
I can let, Tiffany can speak more to this, but these are our reading teachers specifically. They're not full classroom sets, I don't believe, and I think the materials for them to turnkey and use, they're not consumables necessarily, but used for a teacher in the class, or a reading teacher in the classroom.
Are you talking about the reading teachers, the 95%? Yes. So I would say they initially got the first part, and with the implementation rollout, and that we're going to be purchasing more, but they wanted to get in and see what they really needed at first to see if we had enough. With our needs for COVID, that looks a little bit differently. So we purchased a classroom set. It's not like a classroom that you would fill in a traditional classroom. It's more of, do we have a class set that fits the needs of the students for RTI?
So in essence, I guess where I'm going is if each student needs a product that this company's selling, they will have that product to succeed?
Yeah, they will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of 10.02 through 10.05, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And any abstentions? Okay, we have no board policies up for action tonight, but we do have item 12. We have 4 board policies first reading that Mr. Johnson had discussed as part of the policy committee review. So any questions or comments on any of these to bring back to the policy committee? Okay, these will be up for action at our next meeting. Moving on to item 13, board member comments. I'll open it up to anybody that has any comments before we close. Doug?
I just wanted to share a quick kudos to the students and the music staff that were involved in the jazz band, wind orchestra, and strings orchestra presentation the other night. It was really well done, and it was a very successful night.
Great, thank you. Any others? Kevin?
I wish I was more perceptive than not needing to appreciate a well than when it runs dry, but unfortunately, over the last 3 weeks, my family has been dealing with my daughter on an extended leave due to COVID-related symptoms. And in the midst of all the problems that traditionally come with that, I want to publicly thank the middle school, the administration, and the teachers that specifically that my daughter has, but also want to take that as an opportunity to expand upon that with all the teaching staff here at the district. First of all, my apologies for not truly understanding the amount of burden that teachers take on with so many kids out in varying levels, but for their commitment to individually try to keep up and push the enormous boulder up the hill to keep, in this case, I can speak directly for my daughter, on track. It is very appreciative and reassuring that as somebody who graduated from Morseds, my daughter coming here was, and going to the school district is the correct decision, and I thank all the teaching staff and administration very much for that.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I would just like to close with a couple. One, I'd like to welcome Rich, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce your last name correctly. Michelada as our new Director of Transportation that was approved tonight, so welcome to the district, and we're happy to have you on board. And then the last thing I just want to say is just wish the entire district, all staff, administrators, parents, students, the rest of the board, just a wonderful, safe, and happy holidays. Whatever it is that you celebrate, I hope that you all have time to be able to take the time to spend it with family and just give yourself a break and just enjoy the time. So thank you for all the work that all of you do, and I just wish you all the best during this holiday season. So we will be, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. We will be adjourning to executive session. So can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay.
And just so that the public knows, we will be adjourning to executive session for the discussion of individual personnel matter. There is no action to be taken, and that will conclude the meeting at the completion of it. Thank you.